I never thought it could happen to me. Not again. I came home that day, thinking everything was normal, and then I saw it. His phone, her name, the messages. The man I loved, the man I trusted, had betrayed me, and not just a little. He chose her over me, over us. I felt my world crumble in seconds. And somehow I had to decide, do I let him walk over me again? Or do I take back control? What would you do if the person you loved most destroyed everything you believed in? It's strange to look back at your life and realize how different everything felt just a few weeks ago. If you'd asked me in early April of 2025 what my world looked like, I would have said it was beautiful. I would have told you that I was one of the lucky ones. Someone who had found both love and friendship in the same person. My husband and I had been together almost 5 years. We were set to celebrate our anniversary next month, and though we had only been married for less than a year, it felt like our bond was deeper than many couples I knew who had decades behind them. I used to tell people that marriage hadn't really changed anything for us, except that now we wore rings and had the paperwork to prove our commitment. We were already inseparable, already building our lives around each other. We woke up together, cooked together, binged Netflix shows until way too late at night, and even did the boring stuff like folding laundry and grocery shopping, with a kind of silly joy. It wasn't just romance, it was companionship. He was my best friend and I really believed I was his. I won't pretend things were perfect. We argued sometimes, every couple does. But we had this way of working through problems, instead of letting them rot in silence. He would get frustrated over something, I'd snap back, and then after the storm passed, we'd sit on the couch and actually talk. I'd tell him how I felt, he'd tell me his side, and usually one of us would laugh at how dumb the fight was. Then we'd make up, often literally. Our intimacy was good too, maybe even great. We weren't one of those couples who let things fizzle out. I thought we had a healthy, active sex life, the kind where you still flirt in the kitchen, or send cheeky texts when one of you is at work. I took pride in that, in the fact that even after years together, he still looked at me like I was the only woman in the room. Or so I thought. I felt secure, which is why what happened blindsided me so completely. You see, when you trust someone so fully, you stop looking for red flags. Little things that might otherwise spark suspicion just seem harmless. If he left his phone face down, I didn't care. If he mentioned bumping into someone from his past, I didn't feel threatened. He had an ex or two, sure, but we never had drama about it. He assured me they were in the past, and I believed him because why wouldn't I? That's the part that stings the most when I think about it now. How easily I trusted, how much I believed that we were untouchable. I'd already been through betrayal once before. My first marriage ended because my then husband couldn't keep his vows either, and I swore I would never put myself in that position again. But when I met this man, I thought the universe was giving me a second chance. He was different, I told myself. He was safe. Looking back, there were tiny cracks I ignored, like how he sometimes got defensive if I casually asked who he was texting. Not angry, just a little too quick to brush it off. Or how once or twice he'd bring up his ex in a way that felt nostalgic, not overtly, not enough to start a fight, but enough to make me pause internally. I told myself I was overthinking, that it was my past trauma whispering lies in my ear. And maybe it was, but still, part of me wonders if I subconsciously knew something wasn't right. Our daily routine felt solid though. I worked a demanding job that kept me out of the house most days, while he had a more flexible schedule. It worked for I'd come home tired, and he'd already have dinner started, or we'd go out to eat and talk about our days. I'd tell him about a difficult client. He'd complain about something minor like the neighbor's dog barking, just the normal rhythms of married life. The last weekend before everything happened, we even had a little date night. We went to this new Italian restaurant downtown, the kind that had been popping up everywhere lately, trying to cash in on the rustic trendy vibe. I remember he made a joke about the portions being small, and I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my wine. I thought in that moment that life was good. I thought we were happy. I don't know if the universe has a cruel sense of humor, or if I was just too blind to see what was coming, but that bubble burst only a few days later, and the way it happened so sudden, so accidental, still makes my stomach churn. I remember that day like it was etched into my brain. It was a Tuesday, nothing special, just an ordinary workday. I came home a little earlier than usual, around 5:30 because one of my meetings got cancelled. The house was quiet when I walked in, except for the faint sound of running water. He was in the bathroom. His phone, which he usually kept glued to his side, was lying on our bed, screen lit up. At first I didn't even glance at it. I tossed my bag down, kicked off my shoes, and was about to go into the kitchen, when something caught my eye. The screen was open to Snapchat. His snap, and at the top of the chat window was a name that made my stomach drop. His ex. In that instant, I felt something inside me freeze. The moment I saw her name on the screen, it was like the air got sucked out of the room. You know those moments when your brain tries to protect you by convincing you you're imagining things? That's what happened. I blinked, thinking maybe it was just a notification from months ago. Maybe something innocent, like a random hey she had sent and he hadn't responded to. But the chat window was open. Messages were there right in front of me, glowing against the dim light of our bedroom. My hands started to shake before I even touched the phone. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. Curiosity and dread are cruel partners. They drag you forward even when you know the truth will destroy you. I picked up the phone, and within seconds my world cracked open. The messages weren't ambiguous, they weren't harmless, they were intimate. He had met up with her, that very day. The timestamp was fresh, mocking me, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife. They weren't even trying to hide it. They talked about where they'd met, what they'd done, and then the part that made me feel physically ill, him describing what he'd done to her. He had used the words fingering her, crass, clinical, vulgar, and in the same thread of conversation, he talked about me, my hair, my body, as if I were some kind of point of comparison, a reference on a menu. Reading those words, I felt myself spiral. My chest tightened, my breath went shallow, and before I knew it, I was hyperventilating. My vision blurred, my body shaking as though I'd been dropped into ice water. My husband, the man I laughed with, ate with, kissed every morning, wasn't just disloyal, he was casual about it. Like my existence was nothing more than a footnote in his secret little story with her. I don't even know how long I sat there, clutching the phone like it was evidence in some trial. My mind was running in circles, flashing back to all the moments I thought we were happy. Him reaching for my hand while we watched movies. Him telling me he loved the way I styled my hair for our wedding. Him whispering how lucky he was to have me. Were those moments all lies? Were they just placeholders until he could sneak back to her? I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall, but I couldn't move. My body betrayed me. I was frozen. The tears didn't even come at first, just this hollow, stunned silence inside me, like the light switch of my life had been flipped off. And then he walked out of the bathroom. He saw me instantly. I must have been a picture, eyes wide, phone in hand, breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. His face shifted the moment he realized what I was holding. He knew. He didn't even try to lie. He rushed over, babbling apologies before I could even speak, begging, pleading, hands reaching for mine, his voice cracking as he tried to explain, to backtrack, to soften what I'd read. But none of it mattered. I didn't hear half of what he said because my mind was screaming. Why? Why would he do this? Why, when everything between us felt so solid, would he risk it all for her? And the cruelest thought of all wormed its way into my brain. This wasn't even new. This was my second marriage. My second husband, who had looked me in the eye, promised me forever, and then chosen someone else behind my back. Was I cursed? Was I doing something wrong? I took care of myself. I had a career I was proud of. I kept our home clean, cooked meals, supported him, laughed with him, gave him affection. I wasn't perfect, but I tried. I tried so hard, and still it wasn't enough. When he begged me not to leave, I almost laughed in his face. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. If I wasn't worth his loyalty yesterday, why did my leaving suddenly matter today? Why cry now, when the damage was already done? Why care now that the truth was out? And yet, when he broke down in front of me, when he swore it was just a mistake, and that it hadn't gone all the way, something inside me wavered. I hated myself for it, but I wavered. I didn't have the strength in that moment to throw him out, to burn it all down. Instead I heard myself saying the words I never thought I'd say, that I didn't know how he could possibly fix this, but maybe, I would give him a chance. The instant the words left my mouth, I felt the light dim inside me, like a candle snuffed out. It wasn't forgiveness, not real. It was resignation. I didn't feel anger so much as emptiness, like the part of me that used to believe in him had died right there in our bedroom. That evening blurred into something surreal. After the tears dried, and the panic dulled into numbness, we just sat together. We watched TV. We ate leftovers. On the outside it looked like an ordinary night, but inside me, everything had changed. It was like I was playing a role in a play I hadn't auditioned for, pretending to be the same wife, the same partner, even though the foundation of my marriage had collapsed. I went to bed that night next to him, listening to the sound of his breathing, and all I could think was, I don't feel anything, not love, not hate, just this strange hollow void, where my heart used to be. The days that followed were some of the strangest of my life. I've been through heartbreak before, I've even lived through the slow collapse of a marriage, but this was different. This time it felt like I had been ripped out of my own body and dropped into someone else's life, forced to watch a version of myself go through the motions, while the real me floated somewhere above, detached and numb. When I woke up the morning after discovering the messages, I expected to feel rage. I expected to want to scream at him, to pack a bag and slam the door behind me, but when I opened my eyes and saw him lying there beside me, all I felt was this eerie emptiness. He stirred, gave me that half-asleep smile he always did, like he forgot what had happened, like we were just another married couple waking up to a new day. And I remember thinking, how can you smile at me when you know what you've done? I got out of bed without saying much. I went through my routine like a ghost. Shower, coffee, mascara, out the door. At work, I was present in body but not in mind. My coworkers chatted about some news story. I think it was the collapse of that big Baltimore bridge, earlier in the month, and I nodded along, but I wasn't really there. Inside I was replaying the messages over and over, the casualness of them, the way he had compared me to her, like I was some object to be measured against his ex-lover. That comparison cut deeper than the act itself. It wasn't just that he betrayed me physically, it was that he invited her into the private corners of my marriage. He let her peer through the window of my life, commenting on the texture of my hair, the things that made me. And suddenly I felt exposed, cheapened, like all the little intimacies we had built were nothing more than currency he could spend with her. At home he walked on eggshells. He apologized constantly, told me how much he regretted it, how he couldn't believe he'd risked everything for nothing. He used that word a lot, nothing, like what he'd done was meaningless, like it was just a lapse in judgment. But if it was nothing, why did it leave me feeling like I had been gutted from the inside out? I tried to carry on as if life was normal. We had dinner, we watched shows, we even laughed a little, but it was hollow laughter. My body was there, my voice was speaking, but my heart wasn't in. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me like he was trying to measure if I was going to explode, or if I really meant it when I said I'd give him a chance. And the truth was I didn't even know. At night I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, while he slept beside me. That was when the questions hit hardest. Why me? Why again? What was it about me that made men think I wasn't worth loyalty? Was I not exciting enough? Not mysterious enough? Did my kindness make me look weak, easy to betray? I'd run through a mental checklist of everything I did, working hard at my career, staying in shape, cooking, cleaning, making sure our home was warm and inviting, being affectionate, being supportive. I wasn't perfect, no one is, but I wasn't careless. And yet here I was again, blindsided. There's a unique kind of shame that comes with betrayal. It's not just about the person who hurt you, it's about how the world sees you afterward. I kept imagining people imagining their pitying eyes, their whispered thoughts. Poor thing, she couldn't even hold on to her second husband. That shame wrapped around me like chains, keeping me silent, keeping me from telling even my closest friend. It was easier to pretend everything was fine than to face the humiliation of admitting it had happened again. One evening, about a week after I found out, I caught myself staring at him across the dinner table. He was talking about something mundane, his car needing new tires, I think, but I wasn't listening. I was studying his face, the way his mouth moved, the little crease on his forehead, when he was annoyed, and I realized I didn't recognize him anymore. This man who had been my best friend, my safe place, suddenly looked like a stranger wearing my husband's skin. The scariest part was how easily he slipped back into normalcy. He could sit there eating spaghetti, joking about work, while I sat across from him silently screaming inside. That disconnect made me wonder if I had ever really known him at all. If he could cheat and then sit in our living room, watching reruns with me, what else was he capable of hiding? My mental health started to fray. I caught myself zoning out for long stretches, forgetting small things, like where I left my keys or whether I'd replied to an email. I drank more wine than usual in the evenings,
not enough to get drunk, just enough to blur the edges of my thoughts. Sleep came in fragments, broken by flashes of those messages on his phone, the sick feeling in my stomach replaying over and over. And yet I still stayed. I don't even know why, if I'm honest. Maybe it was the shock, maybe the shame, maybe the hope that somehow, some way, I could glue the broken pieces back together. Or maybe I just didn't want to face the truth that I'd married the wrong man again. The thought of another divorce, another failure, another scar on my life story, it felt unbearable, but deep down, I knew something had shifted permanently. I was no longer the wife who trusted, who believed in his words, who felt safe in his arms. That woman was gone. What remained was someone hollow, uncertain, and quietly bracing for the next blow. And as much as I tried to bury it, a seed of something darker began to take root inside me, a quiet, simmering anger. Because if he thought he could break me and then carry on like nothing had happened, he didn't know me as well as he thought he did.
There comes a point where numbness gives way to something else. At first, it was just silence inside me, this heavy fog where my emotions used to live. But slowly, like sunlight piercing through after a storm, other feelings began to break through. Not forgiveness, not love. Anger, cold, deliberate anger. It started small. I caught myself analyzing him, the way he moved around the house, the excuses he gave for being on his phone, the way he lingered in the bathroom longer than usual. Before, I would have brushed those things off. Now, every detail felt like a clue. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was his observer, studying him like a stranger. He thought my silence meant I was softening, but really I was collecting. Wait, I kept replaying that moment in my head. Me holding his phone, his messages laid bare, him dropping to his knees practically begging me not to leave. He had been terrified then, not of losing me, but of facing the consequences. That stuck with me. If he was so desperate for me to stay, then maybe I wasn't as powerless as I felt. Maybe I had leverage. That realization was like flipping a switch. For days I had been walking through life as a ghost. But once I understood that he still needed me, wanted me even, it gave me something to hold on to. I didn't know what I was going to do yet, but I knew I wasn't going to be the fool who just swallowed his betrayal and smiled through it. I started small acts of rebellion, quiet ones. If he expected dinner, sometimes I forgot to cook. If he asked about my day, I'd give clipped answers, as if he no longer deserved access to my world. I stopped volunteering affection, no more surprise hugs in the kitchen, no more casual kisses when passing each other in the hallway. I became cold, calculated, and I watched him squirm under the weight of it. But underneath that control was chaos. My mind was a battlefield. On one side, I thought about revenge, about making him feel the humiliation he had made me feel. On the other, there was this weary part of me that wondered if I had the energy for any of it. After all, hadn't I already wasted enough of my life cleaning up after unfaithful men? Did I really want to sink further into this toxic cycle? I remember one particular night, maybe 2 weeks after everything came out. We were lying in bed, me staring at the ceiling, him scrolling on his phone. The glow from the screen lit up his face, and I felt that anger bubbling again. I thought, what if I just reached over, took that phone and smashed it against the wall? What if I looked him in the eye and told him he disgusted me? The urge was so strong it nearly consumed me. But I didn't do it. Instead, I lay there in silence, planning. Revenge, I realized, didn't have to be dramatic. It didn't have to be screaming matches or shattered glass. It could be quiet. It could be strategic. It could be me taking back control inch by inch, until he was left with nothing but the weight of his own mistake. I started pulling away financially. I had a good job, one that paid well enough for me to stand on my own. Before, I had been generous, blending our accounts, sharing everything. Now, I started rerouting my money, setting aside savings he didn't know about. A private safety net, in case the day came when I finally walked out. I also began reconnecting with myself, almost out of spite. I went back to the gym more regularly. Not because I thought he deserved my body to look a certain way, but because I wanted to feel strong again. I treated myself to little luxuries. A new haircut, a spa day, reminders that I still mattered, even if he had made me feel invisible. And as I did all this, I noticed a shift. He became clingier, he asked more questions about where I was going, who I was with. He seemed almost afraid of the silence between us. Like he could feel me slipping through his fingers. That irony wasn't lost on me. He had risked everything for a fling with his ex. And now he was watching his wife turn into someone he couldn't reach. One night, he broke down again, told me he could tell I was pulling away, begged me not to give up on us. I listened, nodded, let him spill his heart out. Inside though, I felt detached, almost clinical. His words were just noise now, promises I knew better than to believe. What he didn't know was that I had already started imagining my life without him. I pictured moving into my own apartment, maybe in a different part of town. I imagined waking up in a bed that was truly mine, free of his presence. I thought about the freedom of not having to wonder whose name would light up his phone when he left it unattended. The truth was, I wasn't sure if I would actually leave. The shame of a second divorce still loomed over me like a shadow. But knowing I could, that I had the power, the independence, the choice, that knowledge kept me breathing. And yet, in the quiet corners of my mind, another darker thought began to creep in. Maybe it wasn't enough to just leave. Maybe he needed to feel what it was like to have the rug pulled out from under him. To know that the person he thought he could control, the woman he thought would stay no matter what, was capable of turning the table. I didn't know yet how it would end, but I knew this. I was done being the victim. It took me a long time to understand that the resolution wasn't about him. It wasn't about making him hurt, or even making him regret what he'd done. That part of him, the part that betrayed me, didn't deserve my energy anymore. The resolution was about me, about reclaiming myself from the wreckage of my trust and my illusions. I started with small acts of independence. I signed the lease for a new apartment, a place that was mine alone. It wasn't far from the city, not ostentatious, just a space where I could breathe without wondering if every corner held a memory of his lies. Packing my things felt symbolic, each folded sweater and framed photo a quiet declaration. This is mine, and I will not be diminished again. He didn't resist. When I told him I was moving out, he tried briefly to convince me to stay, but I had already learned that persuasion could no longer touch me. I wasn't motivated by anger or revenge at that point. I was motivated by survival, by the need to rebuild the life that he had chipped away at with his choices. In the quiet mornings of my new apartment, I began to notice myself again. The little things, like the sunlight hitting the wall in the way I liked, or the sound of my coffee maker whistling while I scrolled through the news without interruption, felt like small victories. I walked through the streets nearby, relishing the fact that I didn't have to coordinate every step with someone else's whims. I was alone, yes, but not lonely, not in the way that feels heavy and suffocating. This was a freedom that felt earned, like breathing after being underwater too long. And yet, the emotional scars remained. I had been betrayed twice, and the thought haunted me. Late at night I would think about him and his ex, about what he had done, and I felt flashes of that hollow emptiness returning. But I had learned to manage it, to recognize it as a visitor rather than a permanent resident. I journaled, I spoke with a therapist, I leaned on friends who reminded me that my value wasn't defined by someone else's betrayal. In time, the anger softened, though it never fully disappeared. I realized that it was useful in its own way. It had been the fuel that kept me from collapsing, that pushed me to take action instead of falling into despair. And gradually that anger transformed into something else. Clarity. I understood what I wanted from life, from love, from myself. And I realized that I would never again allow someone else's selfishness to dictate my happiness. Months passed. I threw myself into my work and my hobbies, finding new ways to challenge myself, to grow. I reconnected with friends I had let slip away in the busyness of marriage, and I allowed myself to meet new people, carefully, cautiously, without pressure, without expectation. I didn't date with the goal of replacing him, because I knew that no one could replace what I had lost. I dated to explore what it meant to be fully present, fully myself in the company of others. Then came the day I realized I wasn't thinking about him anymore, not constantly, not with that sharp, hollow sting in my chest. I remembered him in flashes, like a photograph tucked into a drawer, a reminder of what I had endured and survived, not a wound that controlled me. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: peace. It was strange, how liberating it felt to let go. For so long I had clung to the betrayal, to the pain, to the anger, as if those emotions gave my life meaning.
But finally I understood that meaning came from reclaiming my own story. It came from walking forward, unafraid, unbound by the mistakes of others. I didn't reconcile, and I didn't need revenge in the way I had once imagined. The strongest revenge I could have taken was to live fully, joyfully, independent, to rebuild a life that he could never touch, and in doing so, to prove to myself that my worth wasn't defined by the men I had loved or who had failed me. Sometimes late at night, I still think about the small betrayals that led up to this moment, the little signs I ignored, the trust I gave too freely, and sometimes, I allow myself a quiet laugh at the absurdity of it all, not bitterness, just recognition. Life has a way of testing you, of breaking you down, but it also has a way of letting you rise again. In the end, I am stronger than I was before, I am wiser, I am more cautious, yes, but also more capable of joy. I no longer measure my value through the eyes of those who failed to see it. I walk through life now with my own rhythm, my own rules, and my own heart intact, and that, I realized, was the only resolution that truly mattered. Not punishment, not apology, not even closure, just me, standing in the sunlight of my own making, finally